Handmade paper is what we're making today, and the paper that we're going to be making is going to be made from recycled materials. We're going to be taking materials that already exist and we're going to be turning them back into paper pulp and using them to create brand new sheets of paper like this one right here. Here are the kinds of things that you're going to need to make your handmade paper.
Scraps of paper, leftovers, pieces of felt, a not for food anymore blender, a sponge, big old bucket of water, a paper press, cooch sheets, which come in packages. You can get them from the paper making supplier kits, things like that. They also come in different sizes. We have smaller ones for smaller sheets of paper and larger ones for larger sheets of paper. Now what's nice about these is you can reuse them over and over and over again as long as you take care of them. They're basically supercharged like paper towels. They're really good at drawing water out of the paper pulp. This is a decal. This one is for a pour mold. And this is also a decal. This one is for more of a dip mold. You can see the different sizes of decals are going to give you different sized pieces of paper because your paper is going to be exactly the same size as the space left inside. And we'll take a look at both of those and how they work. This is a window screen, nothing fancy here. That's used for removing some water. This is to support your screen, and this is a paper making screen. Now all these different decals and screens and things came from a kit. The kits that I'm using here are actually from a company called Arnold Grummer. Arnold Grummer supplies a lot of paper making supplies, and I've been using them actually for a couple of years, and they've held up very well. You can still see the bits of leftover paper stuck in the Velcro and things like that. But they live very happily here and do their job well.
To create paper pulp for our project, we're going to take old sheets of paper. We're going to tear them up until we can't make them any smaller. Then we're going to take these pieces of torn up paper and we're going to be placing them into a blender. Once the paper's in the blender, we're going to add a few cups of water. This helps with moving the paper around through the blender, and it will help rip apart the fibers of the paper, because that's what we're doing. We're reducing the paper back into its original fibers. Once it's in there, make sure you got a hand on top of the blender, and you're going to want to blend that for about 30 seconds to a minute. You want to make sure it's really broken down, no chunks left over. The decal is part of the paper mold. We need to put the support screen and then the paper making screen down on top of that. Then for this particular type of decal, we're using a pour mold, and that goes on top of the paper making screen. This gets held together with these Velcro straps that hold everything in place. And once it's all set and secure, we'll be ready to pour our paper into the mold. I place the mold into the bucket of water corner first, and then I slowly let it fill in with water. There's a little bit of standing water inside of the mold, and this is what our paper is going to float in. We take the paper pulp from the blender, and we're going to pour this into the mold. You need just enough to fill up the space of your mold. And then we agitate it with our fingers. You can take your fingers and just move that paper pulp around so it's evenly distributed in the space inside of the mold. Once it's evenly distributed, the mold is lifted up and out of the water, and all of the water that's in there will begin to drain out the bottom of the mold and back into your big bucket of water. You want to drain out as much as you can at this point. It'll make your job later on a bit easier. Removing water from the pulp is probably the majority of what paper making is. Once you have everything set inside of your decal, it's just a matter of drying it out now. We remove the straps and take the decal off. I'm going to put a window screen on top of this carefully so as not to move anything around. And then I'm going to take a sponge and press it down onto the pulp through the screen. Now if you take a look, I press down and then I release the sponge before picking it up. That's the best way to suck up as much water as you can with each squish of your sponge. If you don't let the sponge pull that water back out, you're going to be here for a while. Once the sponge is feeling full, I take it and I squeeze it over the bucket of water. Because we're going to recycle this water. We're going to use it again and again on all the different sheets of paper we might make. So that's the best way to prevent any kind of waste. Just reuse it, just water. Once I've removed a lot of the water from the screen, I'm going to wipe up the counter and I'm going to take the support screen out from underneath my paper screen. This gives me a harder surface to work on and allows me to help squeeze out even more water. Once I feel that I have taken as much water as I can out with the sponge, I'm going to switch to a couch sheet. Remove the screen carefully, not quickly, so we don't accidentally pull up any paper, and then we're going to place a couch sheet down on top of it. And I press down with my hands onto the couch sheet. Now, some of the kits will give you a press bar, which is basically just a plastic bar that you can rub against the couch sheet. I find it's better to use just my hands because I don't want to damage the couch sheet. I'm going to flip this over so that the paper making screen's on the top. I'm going to give it another quick pass with the sponge just to get as much water as I can out. And I'm going to carefully peel up the paper making screen. Again, I'm going to do this slowly because we don't want to damage that pulp. It is essentially a wet piece of paper right now, pretty fragile. Once I have the screen removed, I place a second couch sheet on top, and I'm going to press down against that as well. Using the heel of my hand gives me a little more weight I can press down on top of that. I flip the paper over, and I'm going to remove my first couch sheet very carefully from the paper. By now, these couch sheets, which are very, very absorbent, have pulled out enough water from the paper pulp that it is now able to be handled. So I can peel that sheet of paper right off the couch sheet and get it ready for its final drying. I'm going to put this between two pieces of felt. This is going to allow for a texture to be formed on the outside of the page. And the felt breathes so that the water that's in here can kind of find its way out through the fabric. One piece on top and one piece underneath, and it's ready to go into the press. Now, you don't have to use a printing press for this or a paper making press for this, but I do because it just works out better. I crank this down and it puts about 2 tons worth of pressure onto this paper if you crank it down really good. And I let this dry for about 24 hours like this. The more sheets of paper you have, you might need a little more time for that. But once that 24 hours is up, I can open up the paper press and remove my felt with my paper in between. This gives us the best kind of sheet because it's dried slowly over a period of time. Now, you don't have to do that. You can put this in an ironing board and you can iron that and get the paper to dry out really quick, or you can let it just dry slowly underneath some heavy books or something like that. I have the equipment because I do this with a big group, so I can get the equipment to do it, but you don't have to. Not everything here is important, but it does make for a nice sheet of paper.
If you like this video, please hit the like button below. You can also subscribe to SterbART to be notified of the latest video uploads and to help support the channel. Keep learning, creating, and inspiring.